Nowadays, it seems like everyone loves Japanese media. Its video games, and especially its anime and manga. Some of the most beloved popular titles in recent memory include Attack on Titan and Kaiju number 8. And if we were to expand that to recognizable anime in general, you have the likes of Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball. But what's one thing a lot of the shows I've mentioned have in common? That's the debt they owe to Tokusatsu, or live-action Japanese special effects. Tokusatsu can fall into at least a few different categories, starting earlier than even most Western Toku fans probably think, and includes war epics. Though there's two types we'll focus on here. There's the giant monster variety, which is known for its men in rubber suits trashing miniature buildings, the Godzilla films of Toho Studios, the Gamera films of Daiei Studios, and the Ultra series of Tsuburaya Productions, from which comes Ultraman, are perhaps the most notable examples of the sort. But there's also the Henshin Heroes variety, out of which comes Toei Studio works like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, the latter adapted into Power Rangers for Western audiences. These properties have had an immense impact on Japanese popular culture, and along with exploring their shared history, the aim here is to highlight a few examples of that impact, namely on anime and manga. There's what feels like countless nods to various Tokusatsu properties over the past 4 decades, from the little things like Godzilla's cameo in Weathering with You, to the more substantial things like Sergeant Frog devoting a whole episode to both something as well known as Ultraman, and to more obscure properties like Iron King and Ambassador Magma. And while Tokusatsu has received foreign adaptations or inspired works outside of Japan, such as the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla TV series, or Way Big from Ben 10, those will not be the focus here. Instead, I will try to keep it strictly Japanese, though don't consider this a comprehensive video. There will certainly be ties that are missed, as these roots run deep, and I would be here for quite some time if I were to make something exhaustive. But hopefully this video will be enough to help appreciate at least some of the connections these art forms share. Without further ado, here's a brief history of Tokusatsu's influence on Japanese media, or how Tokusatsu inspired your favorite anime. It might be difficult to tell now, though during its various high points of mainstream success, roughly from the early 60s into the late 80s, Tokusatsu was a force to be reckoned with within the realm of Japanese entertainment, and viewed as a valuable international export. Much of the Japanese media the world has enjoyed over the last several decades, like the anime mentioned moments ago, were the products of children raised on Tokusatsu.
Yeah, and then what does Ultraman do? Doesn't Ultraman do something?
Food.
Oh, that's fantastic.
At the peak of its popularity, Tokusatsu existed alongside anime as a peer, if not the outright superior force in entertainment. Want an example of that? Look no further than the Toho Champion Festival and Toei Manga Festival, children's matinee programs that ran from the late 1960s, and in the latter case, into the late 1980s, offering kids a theatrical package of the hottest selections in live-action and animated entertainment. At the 1974 spring edition of the Toho Champion Festival, a kid could catch both the debut episode of Neon Human Kashan and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, only 2 of the several highlights available with that edition. So, it should be no surprise then that the children who grew up watching this media, who later became the first generation of otaku creative figures, adored Tokusatsu into adulthood, and expressed that love in their works on more than a few occasions. Which, if isn't clear by now, is a comment that can be rightfully accused of underselling things, as you can find Tokusatsu influences virtually everywhere. So let's take a moment to note a few specific creators from the time who were quite open about their love of the art form. For instance, there's the inventor of Dragon Ball, the late great Akira Toriyama. Did you know he was an extra in the third act crowd scene of 1984's Return of Godzilla? Years earlier in Dr. Slump, his original claim to fame, Toriyama has a number of loving shoutouts to characters like Godzilla, Gamera, and Ultraman. Then, in Dragon Ball, some of Chi-Chi's abilities are basically wholesale lifted from the iconic abilities of Ultra 7. Next we have Isashi Eguchi, a mangaka best known for creating the 80s rom-com gender comedy, Stop Hibari-kun. And a knack for designing rather stylish women. What's less known about him is his interest in Tokusatsu. Yep, Eguchi has been expressing love for Tokusatsu from some of the earliest output of his career, like the manga Suzume Pirates, which has Ultraman cameos. So with that noted, his gender-bent image of the Ultraman monster Dada makes a whole lot of sense. Naturally, his Tokusatsu tribute segment of Kotobuki Goro Show, a 1991 gag comedy OVA based on his work, has rather faithful recreations of memorable moments from early Tokusatsu media, and even starts in black and white before switching to color, mirroring the same real-life transition of the art form. And with his background now explained, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that this happens in the OVA.
Oh, 本当だ。
やったー、かわいくない？三つ編みしてあげよっか。
女子大生の前ではキングシトラのやつおとなしいぞ。
あらやった苦しかった
Another great example of an early otaku icon who loved tokusatsu is Mamoru Oshii, a director probably most famous for the original adaptation of Urusei Yatsura and the 1995 adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. His beloved spin on Urusei Yatsura boasts more than a few nods to tokusatsu characters like Godzilla and Ultraman, though perhaps his biggest tribute of all was the third episode of Patlabor, The Early Days, another homage to the original Godzilla film and the signature weapon of that film, the Oxygen Destroyer.
そう、それは特殊二課の誇る天才的技術者柴茂雄その人であった。そして決意を秘めた彼の手に鈍く光るもの、それはまさしく悪魔の発明、水中酸素破壊装置、オキシジェンデストロイヤー。
Next, there's the artists who started their careers in anime and later tackled tokusatsu or vice versa. When it comes to anime, Toshiki Inoue's resume includes writing for everything from Dirty Pair and Ranma Half to Death Note and Yu-Gi-Oh! But on the tokusatsu side of things, he played a significant role in writing many of the early 2000s Kamen Rider and Super Sentai installments. Something similar can be said for Shusuke Kaneko. Although a lifelong Giant Monster fanboy, Kaneko's earliest industry credits can be traced back to writing episodes of Urusei Yatsura. It would take over a decade before getting to what he's most celebrated for in the world of tokusatsu, and that is directing what are widely celebrated as some of the best Japanese giant monster films ever, the trilogy of Gamera films from the latter half of the 1990s. Curiously, the second episode he wrote for Urusei Yatsura has a giant penguin making a nest out of Tokyo Tower, something we see the bird-like monster Gauss do in Kaneko's first Gamera film, Gamera, Guardian of the Universe. Still, as noted earlier, this pipeline also worked the other way around. That was the case for Chiaka Konaka, the head writer for Digimon Tamers and the highly acclaimed Serial Experiments Lane. But before his involvement with those shows, he played a major role in rebooting the Ultra series in the 90s, with shows like Ultraman Tiga. I could keep going naming relevant figures like Shinji Higuchi, or pointing out individual references to tokusatsu films or shows. However, I'd now like to switch focus to games, anime, and manga that arguably owe their existence to tokusatsu influences, and there are major ones that fit that bill. Let's get this started with Super Sentai, and what better place to start than where it began.
何者だ？赤レンジャー、青レンジャー、キンジャー、モモレンジャー、ブレンジャー、5人揃ってゴレンジャー。
Super Sentai, which debuted in 1975 with Shitara Ishinomori's Secret Squadron Goranger, almost instantly became a sensation with its handful of color-coded heroes, exaggerated poses, hordes of enemy cannon fodder, and, starting with its third installment, Mecha Battles. Works inspired by Super Sentai come a dime a dozen. There are love letters, parodies, and subversive spins from Samurai Flamenco to Go-Go Loser Ranger, to the upcoming isekai comedy series, the Red Ranger becomes an adventurer in another world. And, swinging back to Dragon Ball for a second, there's of course, the Ginyu Force. And that's keeping things limited to anime and manga. However, the most famous example of the possible options here is Sailor Moon? The Magical Girl series by Naoko Takeuchi from the early 90s started as a manga about a single-masked heroine named Sailor V, and, after a considerable reworking, quickly received an anime adaptation that took the world by storm. It remains a staple of anime to this day, massively successful and instantly recognizable. Regular canon fodder for anime gimmick accounts on Twitter. Anyway, you might be wondering how this Magical Girl series is at all related to Super Sentai. Well, in various interviews over the years, Takeuchi has often pointed in its direction, admitting her fondness for the series and how it influenced Sailor Moon. But if you would like to see her say it herself, there's this.
本当はセーラームーンでそういう風に戦隊ものっていうかゴレンジャーとか10レンジャーみたいに、そうそうなんか指令室から出動だみたいなそういうのの女の子版ができるとよかったんだけれどどうもうまくできなくてだからそこら辺からやっぱりセーラームーンの発想が生まれたかなちょっとそれでどうしても女の子を5人出したかったし
With its color-coded team of 5 members, Sailor Moon is essentially a gender-flipped take on the Super Sentai concept with a healthy dose of Magical Girl influence. Speaking of which, Sailor Moon also fits nicely into the long lineage of Magical Girl shows from Japan, and was released in the wake of another massively successful Ishinomori concept. Beautiful Masked Girl Poitrine, the 11th entry in the most popular tokusatsu series of the 80s and early 90s, Toei's Fushigi comedy series. Yet, while interview after interview can be found with Takeuchi mentioning Super Sentai as an essential element in the creation of Sailor Moon, that doesn't really seem to be the case with Poitrine. The best source I was able to find acknowledging a connection was Yomigaeru, Ishino Morihiro file, which reads, "The general concept of Poitrine and Petite is reflected in Sailor Moon and Sailor Chibi Moon, who formed a team of a similar style. Mangaka Naoko Takeuchi would reflect that Poitrine was a massive influence on her work. How interesting." Still, people seem to readily assume one inspired the other, but who can blame them? Magical girls spouting catchphrases and using wands to fight crime? Yep. A tense older sister and younger brother dynamic? Of course. The title character eventually getting a younger sidekick. Checks out. So, credible sources or not, it's understandable that people feel there's a connection there. Next, we have Giant Robo. Giant Robo started as a manga by legendary mangaka Mitsuteru Yokoyama and was soon after adapted into a 1967 tokusatsu series by Toei that took many creative liberties with the property. For that matter, some of the most iconic elements of the series, such as the lead character being a young boy who uses a wristwatch to command the title character, did not originate from the pages of the manga. Those elements came from the Toei series and were retroactively incorporated into the manga in response to their popularity on television. Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still, the Yasuhiro Imagawa directed OVA series from the 90s, is arguably the face of Giant Robo today, but it's not entirely out of the question to consider it an incredibly loose adaptation of the TV series, or failing that, at least saying it owes more to the show than the manga. Because, despite Imagawa's take on Giant Robo primarily being an original tale that celebrates the Yokoyama legacy as a whole, and Imagawa downplaying the tokusatsu version in a later interview, there's a few good reasons to give the tokusatsu version this credit, along with it eclipsing its source material in popularity. It once competed with Ultra 7 for the hearts and eyes of Japanese TV viewers in the late 60s, even finding success in the West as Johnny Sacco and his Flying Robot, and even later as Voyage into Space. On the other hand, the original manga, which had never been officially republished in the 2 decades before the OVA, was regarded as a phantom work, or something difficult to come by, what some people nowadays might rush to call lost media. Therefore, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that Imagawa's OVA contains more elements from the show than the manga, and there's other evidence that the show was on the mind of the OVA staff during production. So, whether directly or indirectly, Giant Robo's tokusatsu adaptation left an indelible mark on the series and, even today, is just as likely to receive a nod as any other version of the property, as seen with the ones in Ouran High School Host Club.
よし、極道っぽいぞ。次はこれだ。それは極道じゃなくて、なんとかロボだろ。そんな言葉どこで使うんだよ。
Or, as seen in the world, only God knows. While the Ultra series started with the 1966 black and white mystery show Ultra Q, the series is best known for its second entry released later that same year, Ultraman, a show about a hero from the stars helping a defense team protect the Earth from rampaging giant monsters and terrifying alien forces, and plenty of installments followed in its massive wake. Growing up, Pokemon creator Satoshi Tajiri was one of Ultraman's many fans. He once said, "I'm part of the first generation who grew up with manga and anime, you know, after Godzilla. I was absorbed with Ultraman on TV and in manga." Tajiri was especially fond of the third Ultra series entry, Ultra 7, and that show's capsule monster concept, which saw lead character Dan Moroboshi summoning monsters from capsules to battle other monsters on his behalf. And, as can be seen in his concept art, Pokemon's working title was even capsule monsters. So it would seem that Tokusatsu, along with his other childhood pastimes like catching bugs and video games like Space Invaders, was fundamental in shaping the Pokemon we know today. Furthermore, various other Pokemon staff admitted to having grown up with and liking the Ultra series as well, enough so to draw influence from it. This energy carried over into the anime with various winks and parodies throughout the years. For example, in the anime, Staryu has various Ultraman sound effects. Speaking of Ultraman, there's another highly successful property that can be said to owe a good amount to it, and that's Evangelion. From his original television series, Neon Genesis Evangelion, to its early 21st century cinematic retelling, Rebuild of Evangelion, Evangelion revels in its tokusatsu influences. Jet Alone was the conceptual name of Jet Jaguar from Godzilla vs. Megalon, and Shinji Inosuke borrowed the Double Rider kick from Kamen Rider. Still, the biggest debt belongs to Ultraman. Hideaki Anno, mastermind behind Evangelion, was and still is a massive fan of the Ultra series. He starred as the title character in a university fan film, and decades later headed a very successful official Ultra series production. As the guy once said himself,
初代ウルトラマンなかった今の僕はいないですね。全然違ったと思う。あれをあの時見たっていうのが大きいと思います。
So it makes sense that Ultra series' influence on Evangelion is present, and comes in all shapes and sizes, from the height of the Evas to the core at the center of their chest, the premise of a defense force working with humanoid giants to defend mankind from giant monsters, the composition of its shots, the vehicle Misato drives and you cannot advance, the symbols on the floor during the end-credit previews of that same movie, the locker in Kensuke's house in Thrice Upon a Time having the logos to all defense teams in the early Ultra series and adjacent Super Raya production shows. Seriously, check it out. They're there. And perhaps even, to some extent, the franchise's fascination with crosses can be traced back to the Ultra series in some way. Then again, Anno's passion is evident even before Evangelion. His anime directorial debut, Gunbuster, shares those Ultra series influences. Another major anime or manga from the last decade or so that falls into a similar category is Attack on Titan. Like Evangelion, it pulls a hefty amount from Giant Monster cinema on television. In fact, in regards to Godzilla vs. Biollante, Attack on Titan creator Hajime Isayama once said, "More than anything, I was captivated by the image created by the intense battle between two monsters. I made tons of sketches of Kaiju when I was younger." And it's difficult not to believe him. When talking about the design of the female Titan, Isayama likened it to that of Ultraman. And speaking of visual influence, Isayama cites the scenes of Gauss eating people in Gamera Guardian of the Universe as a direct inspiration for Titans doing the same in Attack on Titan. But I suspect another Japanese giant monster film might have also played a role here, because apparently they helped to influence the Titans in general. Yep, at least in part, we owe the image of the Titans to the 1966 film, War of the Gargantuas. Isayama explained, "In my early elementary school years, I happened to witness War of the Gargantuas on a TV at a community center where I'd go for evacuation drills. One of the two hairy monsters ripped out a tree with its roots and proceeded to beat the other with it. It was a tremendously horrifying scene. It's been so long since then, so my memory might be a bit off, but I'm sure that I was influenced by the film while creating the Titans." The 2016 film Shin Godzilla, directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, was a tremendous success that resonated with its domestic audience unlike any giant monster movie in decades. Almost immediately, it received nods in other Japanese media like Nier Automata, Dragon Ball, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But Shin Godzilla appears to have had the biggest impact on Kaiju number 8. Series creator Naoya Matsumoto named Shin Godzilla as an important creative spark for his claim to fame, saying, "I liked Ultra Kaiju and Godzilla movies a lot as a child, but became less interested as I became an adult. Shin Godzilla reminded me of why Kaiju were so charming and interesting." When asked how he came up with the idea of linking monsters with natural disasters, Matsumoto responded with, "After watching Shin Godzilla, I was once again struck by the intriguing disaster aspect of monsters. From there, I expanded the setting to make it more interesting as a manga world." Finally, since it would feel wrong not to mention such a popular series, there's Kamen Rider, yet another Toei-produced creation of Shitaro Ishinomori. Whether or not Kamen Rider has been the core, or even a major contributing force behind something from another medium, it arguably makes up for that with the sheer number of references it gets across the media landscape. Rider kick after rider kick after rider kick. The references feel near endless, popping up in everything from High School DD to the Fate series. Persona 5 alone has some pretty interesting nods, like Morgana and Reo Kamiyama. Heck, the common enemy grunts from the original iteration of Kamen Rider, the shocker combatants, tend to show up a decent bit in some form or another, such as here in Card Captor Sakura.
有給先バイトは
今日はお休みトヤは怪人に入ってるけど
Now, to name a few more examples of how Tokusatsu influenced other media, there's the 1999 short film Digimon Adventure, which was deliberately evocative of kaiju films, or how Kinnikuman started as an Ultraman parody, with the title character literally being the 8th Ultraman brother, the bastard Ultra brother. It became its own thing later down the road, yet even then its Tokusatsu roots are still evident.
おお、待てよ。たった一人いたぞ。 ウルトラマンに憧れ地球を怪獣の手から守ろうとするがいつも負けてばっかしのドジなヒーローが。
For another example, there is the shared body dynamic between the lead characters in Birdie the Mighty, where a space cop accidentally kills an innocent bystander during their pursuit of a criminal and then merges their life with the victim as atonement, which seems more or less lifted from the original Ultraman, albeit it takes the concept further than the original Ultraman does. Anyway, much like earlier, I could keep going. But, instead of continuing to focus on how Tokusatsu influenced original anime and other Japanese media, let's switch gears to see how existing Tokusatsu made the transition from live action to animation. While not the earliest example, which can go back at least as far as the King Kong show in 1966 or Moonlight Mask in 1972 depending on what you consider anime, the most prominent early example of such a transition is the 1979 TV anime, The Ultraman. After the Ultra series fell on hard times in the mid-70s and suffered a pause in production, Tsuburaya Productions saw that anime was reaching newfound levels of popularity and decided to take a gamble on reviving the series in that medium. The show was produced by Sunrise Animation, the same Sunrise Animation behind Mobile Suit Gundam. In fact, not only were both shows being made at the same time, but famed Gundam creator Yoshiyuki Tomino, following the cancellation of the original Gundam due to low viewership, even worked on the Ultraman. Yep, Tomino and his team brought their talent and style over to Ultraman. And you can bring home that style too with the latest and greatest Mobile Suit Gundam collaboration with FX Creations. I want to share with you my top recommendations for daily accessories that are stylish and practical, all without breaking the bank. I've been staying hydrated and keeping my drinks hot or cold for up to 24 hours with this Gundam water bottle. The design is not only eye-catching and iconic, but it's also durable enough for daily use. Made with 304 stainless steel, it has a push-button lid that's easy to use with one hand, and is leak-proof when closed so I can quickly use it on the go without any worries of it spilling in my new Mobile Suit Gundam backpack. This backpack's design is refined yet understated with its mecha element, and its subtle aesthetic is perfect for everyday use. It's also insanely roomy. Just look at the amount of stuff I can put in here. There's 2 padded compartments for both a 17-inch computer and a 15-inch computer. If you're still in school, all your textbooks and notebooks slide in here with plenty of room to spare. And that's not all. There's a front pocket here and 2 side pockets that can fit a bunch of personal items. It even comes with a giant carabiner that you can clip stuff onto. Even with this backpack stuffed to the brim, it's not going to be heavy at all because of its unique patented HES suspension system. The HES system is the stainless steel rebound core on the back of the backpack which creates upward rebound force. So, even with my entire life in here, my heavy backpack is still going to feel super light on my shoulders and spine. But let's say I don't need to carry my entire life with me. Well, this compact sling bag has been one of my most used items as of late. It may look teeny on the outside, but it can still fit all of my essentials such as this tablet, my water bottle, and my console, because there are 2 main compartments here, making this bag very roomy, yet it's still so small and sleek, perfect for being that one personal item you can fit under the seat on your flight easily. And whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you can comfortably sling this bag on both sides, since you can buckle the strap to either side. This bag is constructed with a durable, high-quality fabric. There's a USB charging port here for charging on the go, and this rear button compartment is perfect for keeping your personal items like your phone and wallet safe. Speaking of wallet, this wallet is also compact and sleek. It's designed and made with a high-quality genuine leather, and both functional and stylish. I love how this embossed EFSF logo feels every time I reach for my wallet. And despite being a compact wallet, there are so many compartments for me to fit all my bills, coins, and a bunch of cards. And when I say that you can get your hands on these stylish and practical goods without breaking the bank, I really do mean it. Because right now, FX Creations is having a 40% off sale for all of these items. And if you use my code blunova or click the link in the description, you can get another 5% off your entire order. As this is a limited time collaboration, these items won't be around forever, so click the link in my description before they're all sold out. And thank you to FX Creations for sponsoring this video. Where was I? Ah yes, Ultraman. Long story short, the Ultraman was enough of a hit to secure the funds to return to live-action productions, and that's exactly what Tsuburaya Productions did. Unfortunately, things went south fairly quickly, and the company spent most of the next decade experimenting with anime again. What came next was a very different approach: Ultraman Kids. Ultraman Kids and its various iterations from TV show to movie to OVA debuted in the mid-80s and lasted until the early 90s. It is recognized as a success that helped attract a new audience during another break in live-action shows. On the less successful side of things, there was Ultraman: The Adventure Begins in 1987, a collaborative effort between Tsuburaya Productions and Hanna-Barbera. Elsewhere, as noted earlier, the 80s was the start of countless winks and nods to tokusatsu within anime and manga like Urusei Yatsura and Wingman. But the most notable thing worth mentioning here is the host of tokusatsu characters and imagery featured alongside anime characters and American pop culture icons in the shorts of Daikon Film, those being Daikon 3 and Daikon 4, 2 openings to the Japan science fiction conventions of the early 80s. With the 90s comes lightheartedness as a wave of chibi or super deformed animated versions of Kamen Rider, Godzilla, and Ultraman hit the scene. To name a few, there was Ultraman Graffiti in 1990, SD Kamen Rider in 1993, Recommend Godzilla Land in 1994, Ultraman Company and Ultraman Super Fighter Legend in 1996, and Ultraman M78 Theater Love and Peace in 1999. There was the 2-episode OVA Super Atricon in 1995, and the animated Android Kikaider installments of the early 2000s. But those kind of shouldn't count since they aren't exactly based on their earlier tokusatsu relatives, the 1963 Toho film Atricon, and the Toei TV series Android Kikaider from 1972. Super Atricon draws more from the original 1900 novel, The Undersea Warship, A Fantastic Tale of Island Adventure, and Android Kikaider, the animation, draws more from the manga that was released the same year as its tokusatsu counterpart. So, the lighthearted entries of the 90s aside, there isn't much to discuss for well over a decade. Actually, there is something I almost forgot. There was Yamato Takeru in 1994, a TV anime series and its OVA sequel related to a Toho Studios live-action film of the same name from the same year. They were part of more ambitious plans for a mixed media project based on the titular Japanese folk hero that never saw the light of day due to the failure of the live-action film. Which reminds me, there's something else here that matters, and that's Cutie Honey. Specifically the 2004 live-action film by Hideaki Anno, which itself is a tokusatsu reimagining of an early 70s manga and anime series by Go Nagai. Why does that matter? Well, that's because, much like the Yamato Takeru situation, later that same year there was the release of Cutie Honey, an animated retelling of the 2004 film. So, as an animated adaptation of a distinct tokusatsu entity, Cutie Honey also technically counts. However, more recently, as the mainstream appeal of tokusatsu has once again faded and this time quite possibly for good, we have started to see an increasing number of live-action figures reimagined in the animated medium. Things begin on a rather unique note in the 2010s with Kaiju Girls from Tsuburaya Productions, a multimedia sub-franchise that reimagined the various kaiju of the Ultra series as beautiful girls. On a more conventional note, between 2015 and 2018, there were 3 anime television shows and related films based on Garo, an adult-oriented tokusatsu television series created by Keita Amemiya back in 2005. In 2017, Godzilla made the leap into anime again with a trilogy of films from Polygon Pictures written by Gennaro Bucci. And in 2021, there was a television series called Godzilla Singular Point by Bones Inc. and Orange Co. Both are apparently considered successes by Toho, and Singular Point even won a few notable awards. Most recently, starting in 2023, there was a return to the wacky hijinks of the 90s with the web series Chibi Godzilla Raids Again. Ultraman dropped in 2019, a belated alternate timeline sequel to the original Ultraman television series and based on a 2011 manga from the guys behind Lion Barrels of Iron. The unique take on the series seems to have done remarkably well for itself, landing on the list of one of the most watched anime on Netflix Japan of 2019 and lasted for 3 seasons. Kamen Rider finally got a proper anime in the form of Futo PI in 2022, an adaptation of a manga sequel to Kamen Rider Double from 2009. Gamera Rebirth, the first full Gamera project in almost 20 years, released on Netflix in 2023, to little fanfare or attention. But the most successful of these tokusatsu to anime transitions almost certainly has to be SSSS Gridman from fall 2018. A belated newcomer-friendly sequel to a Tsuburaya Productions property from the early 90s, Lightning Superhuman Gridman. Animated by Trigger, the studio filled with former Gainax staff and behind works such as Kill la Kill, the project has its roots in Boys Invent Great Hero, an animated Gridman short that Trigger staff produced for Hideaki Anno's Japan Animator Expo in 2015. The Japan Animator Expo was an exhibition that allowed Japanese artists to showcase their abilities without regard for commercial concerns, out of which came shorts like the viral hit Me 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 and the precursor for what became Yuri on Ice, Endless Night. The Ultraman Jackal vs. Ultraman came out of this expo as well, but that's another story. I just wanted to quickly acknowledge the existence of this loving tribute to the old school Ultra series somewhere in this video. Anyway, much like Boys Invent Great Hero, SSSS Gridman retains the formula and maintains plenty of connections to its source material, such as bringing out an updated version of the original theme song from the 1993 live-action series. Still, it does more than enough to carve out an identity of its own, and with the help of the Rika's Thick Thighs meme, was one of the more notable titles of its season and a pretty sizable hit in general that has spawned a sub-series of its own still active today. It even took home an award from the Seiyu Awards, an annual Japanese award ceremony that celebrates the best in science fiction media, and is the only one of these anime to do it besides Godzilla Singular Point. So, that's a rough history of how tokusatsu influenced some notable titles, and how former tokusatsu properties were adapted into anime. While not exhaustive, those should be a lot of the major beats. There are a few things I wasn't sure where to fit in. For example, people with a passing knowledge of anime and manga history are probably somewhat familiar with the early 1960s anime adaptations of Astro Boy and Tetsujin 28. But did you know that both had tokusatsu adaptations that predate their run in anime? Yep, there was a live-action Astro Boy in 1959 and the live-action Tetsujin 28 in 1960. Or did you know about the mangaka Go Nagai, the guy who made Cutie Honey and Devilman, and his connections to the Ultra series, like his vintage Ultra 7 parodies? And on another related note, in 1976, Tsuburaya Productions produced an animated live-action effects hybrid called Dinosaur Expedition Born Free. But that's enough for now. This video is long enough and overdue as is. Were you surprised by anything here? If I missed anything important, let me know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to share your favorite homage to a tokusatsu series in a Japanese video game, live-action work, or animated work, or share your favorite major example of a tokusatsu inspiring or influencing another series. But until next time, thank you for watching and take care.